The piercing sound of my phone ringing dragged me from a restless sleep. It was 3:17 a.m., and the screen flashed a number I didn't recognize. With a heavy heart, I answered, voice trembling, Mrs. Collins? This is Officer Ramirez from the local precinct. We have some information about your husband, Mark. My breath hitched. The world narrowed to that one moment. Ma'am, there's been an incident. Your husband's been caught trying to transfer a large sum of money, more than $50,000 from your children's college fund to an unknown account. We're investigating suspected fraud. My hands shook, the room spinning. Mark had always seemed like the perfect husband, the dedicated father, the responsible provider. How could he do this? Our kids' futures, years of sacrifices, painstaking savings slipping away in a moment. My mind raced through the past few months. The strange late-night texts, his sudden secrecy, the way he avoided my questions. Was there someone else? Did this money have something to do with that? I could almost hear the cruel laughter of betrayal echoing in my chest. I sat there frozen, the weight of his actions crashing down like a tidal wave. The foundation of our family shattered in an instant. As dawn broke, the fragile calm shattered by a new revelation. Mark wasn't just reckless, he had a secret girlfriend. And she was the reason behind everything. How had I missed the signs? How could the man I trusted with everything tear apart our family and steal our children's future? But I wasn't about to let him get away with it. Not this time. I was going to take back everything and more. Before this nightmare unfolded, life with Mark had been, well, what you might call normal, comfortable, steady, nothing too flashy, just the everyday rhythm of a suburban family doing its best. We met in college, two kids thrown together in a sea of late-night study sessions, coffee runs, and shared dreams of building something meaningful. Mark was the dreamer, the guy who always had a sparkle in his eye and a new idea up his sleeve. I was the planner, the one who kept us grounded, balancing spreadsheets and life's chaos with a quiet determination. Our first apartment was small and cramped, but full of hope. The paint was chipped, the floors creaked, and the kitchen was so tiny that if you turned the wrong way, you'd knock over a coffee mug. But that little place was ours. We worked multiple jobs, me juggling marketing gigs, Mark doing odd freelance tech projects, scraping pennies to build a foundation. When Ella was born, and then Jake 2 years later, everything changed. Suddenly, life wasn't just about us anymore. It was about their little hands holding ours, the sleepless nights, and the endless school projects. Mark was the kind of dad who never missed a game or recital. Weekends were sacred. Baseball games, school plays, trips to the park. He made pancakes on Sunday mornings with a goofy grin, flipping them high in the air while the kids giggled around the kitchen table. I was the financial brain of the family, juggling bills, balancing budgets, and obsessively tracking the kids' college savings. I wanted to make sure Ella and Jake had every chance in the world to follow their dreams without money holding them back. Our house in a quiet Ohio suburb was more than a place, it was a sanctuary. Every room held memories. The living room where we celebrated birthdays and family movie nights. The backyard where Jake learned to ride his bike, scraping his knees but always getting back up. The kitchen, cluttered with science fair projects and homework assignments. I could still hear Ella's laughter bouncing off the walls, a sound so familiar and precious that it warmed even the coldest days. At work, I was steadily climbing the ladder as a marketing manager, always pushing for the next promotion. Mark had a stable job at a software firm, leading projects and bringing home stories about office chaos and deadlines. We were tired, sure, balancing work, parenting, and marriage, but we were in it together. Late at night, after the kids were asleep, we'd sit on the couch and talk about the future. Ella wanted to be a veterinarian, always rescuing stray animals. Jake was obsessed with space. He had posters of astronauts plastered on his walls and begged for a telescope every birthday. But as much as we had, there were little signs beneath the surface that something wasn't quite right. It started slowly. Mark began coming home late, saying he was caught up in urgent work, his phone buzzed incessantly, and sometimes he'd step outside just to take calls, whispering into the night air. I told myself it was stress, a midlife crisis maybe, but the late nights piled up, and so did my doubts. I started glancing at our joint bank account, noticing withdrawals that didn't add up, small at first, then larger sums. My heart would race each time I logged in, hoping it was a mistake or a pending transaction. But no, the money was disappearing. I felt like I was losing grip on something precious, the future I had carefully planned slipping away without warning. Friends noticed Mark's mood shift too. He was less engaged at social gatherings, distracted during conversations, his laughter more forced. When I mentioned it to close friends, they shrugged and said, "Men go through phases." I wanted to believe it, so I buried my fears beneath layers of busy schedules and nightly prayers for strength. At home, tension simmered. Mark's distracted demeanor made me feel invisible, like I was sharing my life with a stranger. I found myself sitting alone in the kitchen, clutching a coffee mug, wondering when the man I married had slipped away. I remembered the countless mornings when he'd kiss me goodbye with that infectious smile and the promise that we're building something great. Now, it felt like that promise was hollow, echoing in an empty room. Still, I held on to hope. Love, I told myself, would find a way. Maybe this was just a rough patch, a storm we'd weather together. But deep inside, the gnawing fear grew that something was terribly wrong, something I wasn't ready to face. The first real blow came when I logged into the college fund account one evening, preparing to pay for Ella's summer camp. The numbers stared back at me, half the savings gone. Thousands of dollars vanished like smoke in the wind. My hands trembled as I scrolled through transaction histories, each entry like a stab to the heart. It wasn't just money, it was the promise of their future, their dreams, disappearing before my eyes. I confronted Mark that night, the words trembling off my tongue. "Where's the money? This isn't just about us anymore, it's our kids' education, their future." His eyes darted away, avoiding mine. He muttered, "It's complicated." That word, simple yet loaded, slammed into me like a sledgehammer. Complicated? What did that even mean? I needed answers, but all I got was silence and a web of lies that was about to unravel my entire world. The first time I really noticed something was wrong, it wasn't with a grand revelation, but a creeping unease that settled deep in my gut. It was a chilly Thursday evening in late October. I had just put the kids to bed after a long day of juggling work deadlines and soccer practice. Mark was supposed to be home early for dinner, but his chair was empty. His phone buzzed endlessly on the kitchen counter, lighting up with texts and calls from a name I didn't recognize. Sarah. At first, I tried to shrug it off. Maybe a coworker, a client? But the timing was odd. Texts late into the night, messages filled with emojis and inside jokes that Mark never shared with me. I tried not to think about it, convincing myself I was just being paranoid. The next morning, I casually checked the bank account again, something I'd been doing more often lately. The balance was dangerously low, but what really sent my heart plummeting were several large withdrawals marked simply as transfers to an unfamiliar account. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. I typed out a calm text to Mark, "Hey, can we talk about the money? Something doesn't add up." His reply came hours later, cold and dismissive. "It's nothing, just work stuff. Stop worrying." But worry was exactly what I did. Over the next few weeks, the tension in the house grew thicker. Mark became more secretive, retreating behind vague excuses and half-truths. I found myself tiptoeing around him, afraid to ask questions, yet desperate for answers. One afternoon, I caught a glimpse of a receipt crumpled in the trash, a fancy restaurant dinner, an expensive bottle of wine, a name on the bill that wasn't mine. One night, I decided to confront him. I sat him down in the living room, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mark, I need to know what's going on. Who's Sarah? Why are you spending money that was supposed to be for Ella and Jake's college fund?" He looked away, swallowing hard. His usual confident facade crumbled just for a moment. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, he finally said, voice barely above a whisper. She means something to me, something to him. The words felt like knives piercing through my chest. The man I trusted, the father of my children, was hiding a secret life. Days passed, and I pieced together what I could from texts, emails, and the fragments of conversations overheard late at night. Mark wasn't just spending money on Sarah, he was building a life with her. I found photos on his phone, selfies of them smiling, wrapped in each other's arms, vacation plans, hotel reservations, gifts that I had no idea about. My heart shattered in slow motion. I remembered the nights he was working late while I stayed up worrying, the mornings when he came home smelling of unfamiliar perfume. All the little things I had dismissed suddenly screamed at me. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was deeply personal. He had stolen not only the college fund but my trust, my sense of security. One evening, after the kids were asleep, I sat alone in the dark kitchen, scrolling through Mark's messages. The pain was overwhelming. Anger, sadness, disbelief mingled into a toxic storm inside me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run away. But I also wanted answers. Why? How could he risk everything for someone else? When I finally confronted him again, this time with the evidence laid bare, Mark didn't deny it. I never wanted to hurt you, he said, his voice cracking. I was lost. I thought I could have both lives, but I was wrong. His apology felt hollow, a poor salve on a wound that was bleeding deep. The future I had meticulously planned for our children, the college tuition, the summer camps, the college visits, was slipping through my fingers. Mark's secret had fractured the foundation of our family. The days that followed were a blur of whispered arguments, cold silences, and endless questions from the kids. Ella asked why Daddy wasn't around as much. Jake noticed the tension and kept asking if everything was okay. I put on a brave face for them, but inside, I was crumbling. I reached out to close friends, my sister, anyone who could help me make sense of the chaos. They reminded me I wasn't alone. The betrayal was a painful wound, but not the end. Still, the weight of what Mark had done felt suffocating. Weeks turned into months. I watched Mark live a double life, sneaking out for secret calls and weekend getaways. Our home felt empty, even when we were all in the same room. The laughter and warmth I had taken for granted were replaced by suspicion and sadness. At night, I'd lie awake, thinking about the future. What kind of parents were we now? How could I protect Ella and Jake from the fallout? The betrayal had taken more than money, it had taken our family's soul. But even in the darkest moments, a spark of determination grew inside me. I wasn't going to let Mark's mistakes define our lives. I would fight not just for myself, but for my children's future. I would find a way to reclaim what was lost, to build something new from the ruins, because sometimes the deepest betrayals forge the strongest resolve. Struggle and growth. 800 to 1,000 words. Days after confronting Mark were some of the hardest I had ever faced. The house, once filled with warmth and laughter, now echoed with silence and tension. Every morning, I forced myself out of bed, determined to put on a brave face for Ella and Jake. But behind the calm exterior, my mind was a whirlwind of confusion, anger, and fear. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, the early light filtering through the blinds, the smell of burnt coffee filling the air. I stared at the pile of unpaid bills and the nearly empty bank statements. The money meant to secure our children's future was gone, drained without a word of warning. I felt betrayed, not just as a wife but as a mother. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I sat curled up on the couch, scrolling through my phone, reading messages of support from close friends. My sister texted, "You're stronger than you know. We'll get through this together." Those words were a lifeline, but strength didn't come easily. I often caught myself replaying every moment, every conversation with Mark, searching for signs I had missed. Why hadn't I noticed the late-night texts, the secret smiles at his phone, the distant looks when I asked him about work? Work became my refuge. I threw myself into my job, staying late at the office, burying my heartache in spreadsheets and meetings. But even then, the guilt gnawed at me. I was torn between wanting to scream at Mark and wanting to hold on to what was left of our family. The nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, the house silent except for the occasional creak of settling wood. I'd stare at the ceiling, heart pounding, imagining a future without the stability we'd built. Ella and Jake deserved better. I owed it to them to fight. Slowly, I began to research. I needed to understand our finances better, how the money had vanished, and if there was any way to reclaim it. I spent hours online, learning about financial fraud, bank policies, and legal options. The more I learned, the more empowered I felt. Knowledge became my weapon. I also reached out to a trusted financial advisor recommended by a friend. Our meetings were uncomfortable at first. Talking about betrayal and broken trust was painful but necessary. She helped me understand our financial situation in detail and gave me hope that recovery was possible. Alongside the financial battle, I faced the emotional turmoil. My friends became my pillars. We'd meet for coffee, and I'd vent, sometimes sobbing, sometimes laughing through tears. My best friend, Lisa, reminded me, "You're not alone in this. You're a warrior." Her words fueled my determination. At home, I worked hard to rebuild a sense of normalcy for the kids. I didn't want them to carry the burden of their father's mistakes. I joined Ella at her school events, helped Jake with his science projects, and even tried to cook their favorite meals. Even when my appetite disappeared, therapy became a turning point. I wasn't ashamed to ask for help. Sitting in that quiet room, sharing my pain and fears, I began to see cracks in my despair. The counselor helped me navigate my feelings, teaching me coping strategies and ways to reclaim my sense of self-worth. During this time, I also started journaling. Pouring my thoughts onto paper helped me process everything. Writing about the betrayal, my fears for the future, and my small victories each day became a ritual. It was a way to hold on to hope, even when everything felt uncertain. Months passed, and while the pain didn't disappear, it softened. I discovered reserves of strength I never knew I had. I wasn't just surviving, I was growing. I learned to set boundaries with Mark, limiting contact to what was necessary for the kids. I refused to be drawn into his lies or excuses anymore. With a clearer mind, I began to plan my next moves carefully. I researched legal options and consulted with a lawyer friend. We discussed filing for separation and how to protect our children's interests financially and emotionally. Each step was scary but necessary. I also began to rebuild my social life. I reconnected with old friends, joined a local book club, and started volunteering at the community center. These activities gave me purpose beyond the heartbreak and reminded me of my identity outside of marriage. Physically, I took up yoga and evening walks, which helped ease my anxiety. The fresh air and quiet moments in nature became sacred. I felt myself becoming stronger, more centered, and ready to face whatever came next. Throughout this time, the kids were my anchor. Watching Ella practice her violin, seeing Jake's proud smile after a soccer goal, it reminded me why I couldn't give up. I wanted to show them that even when life shatters you, you can put the pieces back together. Of course, there were setbacks. Some days, the anger overwhelmed me. I'd snap at Mark during our limited interactions or break down when the kids asked why Daddy wasn't around. But each time, I reminded myself this was part of healing. One cold winter afternoon, Mark called to say he was moving out. I didn't feel relief. I felt the heavy weight of change settling in, but I was ready. The months of struggle and growth had prepared me for this moment. I knew the road ahead would be long, but I wasn't alone. I had rebuilt myself piece by piece, and with every step, I reclaimed a little more of my life. The betrayal had broken me, yes, but it had also sparked a fire within me. A fire to protect my children, to fight for justice, and to build a future on my own terms. It started with a spreadsheet. I wasn't out for blood, I was out for justice. I didn't want to destroy Mark for the sake of revenge. I wanted him to feel the sting of what he did, not just financially, but emotionally. I wanted him to experience the unraveling of trust, the sense of loss, and the cold reality of consequences. I began small, using the financial knowledge I had gained during those long nights of research. I meticulously traced every account Mark had touched. He wasn't as clever as he thought. He had used joint accounts to funnel money into a private investment app, and from there into a savings account under a business name I'd never heard of. A little digging along with a quiet chat with a friend at the bank confirmed it was an account in his name only. He'd thought he was being slick, using a DBA doing business as name, but he had left a trail. So I collected the evidence: screenshots, transactions, statements, dates. I saved everything onto an encrypted drive, backed it up in the cloud, and printed hard copies that I stored in a locked file box. Then, I made a phone call to a family law attorney. I didn't want a messy, tabloid-style drama, but I did want to file for divorce strategically when it would hurt him most. I worked with the attorney to gather everything: financial records, proof of misused funds, evidence of the affair, social media geotags, and screenshots from his so-called business trips. I even subpoenaed his private banking activity. The legal system moves slowly, but precision was power. My lawyer helped me freeze any further transactions from our joint accounts. When Mark tried to withdraw more money for a romantic getaway to Miami with his girlfriend, the card declined. That was the first crack in his smug smile. Meanwhile, I didn't let on. I kept things civil, cordial, even for the kids, for the optics. I wanted him relaxed and unprepared. We even had one awkward Sunday dinner where I let him ramble on about how the kids would adjust and how he was figuring out his new life. But behind my neutral expression, I was quietly pulling levers. I filed for divorce the following Monday, serving him at his office just as his girlfriend was visiting. I didn't enjoy the drama, but I won't lie, it was poetic. The papers included claims of financial misconduct, misuse of marital assets, and abandonment. He was shocked, furious, but most of all cornered. That was only the beginning. The court sided with me in freezing all personal accounts until the case was settled. I filed for temporary spousal and child support and was granted full physical custody until proceedings concluded. The judge also ordered Mark to repay a portion of the drained college fund or face potential criminal charges. His lawyer scrambled. His girlfriend fled. Apparently, financial instability wasn't attractive, but I wasn't done. Using my access to the family home title, which was in both our names, I exercised my right to force a sale or buy him out. I chose the latter. I used a portion of my retirement savings and help from my parents to buy out his share at current market value, well below what it would have sold for in 6 months. He needed cash, and I made sure he got just enough, and not a penny more. He moved into a one-bedroom apartment downtown. The same man who had once called our suburban home too small now complained about parking space and paper-thin walls. The kids didn't want to sleep over at his place, and I didn't push them. But there was one more piece to finish. I met with the financial advisor one last time and opened 2 new 529 college savings accounts for Ella and Jake. I made small automatic monthly deposits. It wasn't much, but it was mine, hard-earned, safe. I even set up a trust to prevent any future access by Mark. One afternoon, I sat in my sunlit kitchen and watched as Jake painted a volcano for his science fair project, and Ella practiced a gentle tune on her violin. And I smiled, because I had taken back what was stolen, not just the money, but the peace, the security, the confidence I thought I had lost. Mark had gambled our future for a fling, and in the end, he lost far more than he'd ever imagined. I never raised my voice. I never burned his clothes or keyed his car. My revenge was silent, strategic, and complete. He had taken everything, and I had taken it all back with interest. It's strange, the silence that follows chaos. There were no trumpets when the dust settled, no grand declaration that the war was over. Just a quiet Saturday morning where the kids were still asleep. The coffee brewed on the counter, and I sat by the window, watching the sun slowly climb over the rooftops. In that moment, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore, I wasn't bitter, I wasn't even sad. What I felt was light, as if I had been carrying a mountain on my back for years and finally, I'd set it down. Mark still sees the kids, of course. Every other weekend, he shows up with fast food bags and too loud music, still trying to impress them, still not quite understanding that all they ever wanted was his consistency, not his theatrics. Ella talks about him less, Jake more so, but with a twinge of disappointment that breaks my heart. I never speak badly about Mark in front of them. I don't need to. They see the truth all on their own. We go to therapy together now, not because we're broken, but because we're healing. I want them to understand that sometimes things fall apart, but it doesn't mean they have to. As for me, I got a new job, one with better hours, closer to home. I planted tomatoes in the backyard. I joined a book club. I even said yes to coffee with a nice man I met at the library. No pressure, just a start. I've learned that revenge isn't about hurting someone back. It's about reclaiming the pieces of yourself they tried to erase. It's about finding your voice again in the silence, your power in the stillness. Mark took so much from us, but in the end, he gave me something too. He gave me the chance to start over. On my terms, and this time, I'm not just surviving, I'm living.